The billionaire's mansion stood on the top of the hill, shining under the afternoon sun. From the outside, it looked like a dream. Tall white pillars, glass walls, and gardens so perfect they looked fake. But inside, it was nothing like a dream. Every maid in the city knew about that house. They didn't call it the White Palace for its beauty. They called it the House of Tears. The reason was one woman, Madame Elaine, the billionaire's new wife. No maid lasted long under her rule. Some left after a week, others after only a day. There were stories of maids crying in the kitchen, maids leaving without their pay, and even maids running away in the middle of the night. The staff whispered about her cruelty. She made them clean the marble floor with toothbrushes. She inspected bed sheets with a magnifying glass. She once fired a maid for serving tea that was 1 degree too cold. So when Amina walked through the tall iron gates, the guards looked at her with pity. She was young, barely in her 20s, her brown skin glowing under the sun, her hair neatly tied back. She wore a plain white blouse and a long skirt. She looked nervous but determined. The head butler, Mr. Grant, met her at the entrance. He was tall, thin, with silver hair and a tired face. "Are you sure you want this job?" he asked in a low voice. Amina nodded. "I need it," he sighed. "They all say that." As they walked inside, Amina's eyes widened. The place was bigger than any building she had ever been in. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling, paintings worth millions covered the walls, and the marble floor reflected her footsteps. But there was no warmth. It felt cold, like a museum. Mr. Grant led her into the grand dining hall. The long table was set with golden plates and crystal glasses. The air inside was tense. In the middle of the room stood Madame Elaine herself. She was beautiful in a sharp, dangerous way, tall, with icy blue eyes and hair the color of gold. She wore a silk dress that looked more expensive than Amina's entire street. Her lips curved into a smile, but it wasn't kind. In front of her stood another maid, trembling. The maid's uniform was torn, not by accident, but by Elaine's own hands. Pieces of white fabric lay on the floor like fallen snow. "You think you can serve me looking like this?" Elaine's voice was smooth but sharp. "Out. You're done." The maid burst into tears and ran out of the room, covering her face. Amina froze. She had seen difficult employers before, but never like this. Elaine's eyes turned to her. Ah, the new one. She walked closer, her heels clicking against the marble. She looked Amina up and down as if inspecting a piece of furniture. "Black," she said softly, as if tasting the word. "We haven't had one of you in a while." Amina kept her head down, saying nothing. Elaine circled her like a cat. "Do you know why no maid lasts here?" "No, ma'am," Amina answered quietly. "Because I have high standards," Elaine said with a cold smile. "And most people are disappointing." Mr. Grant cleared his throat. "Shall the first show her to her quarters?" Elaine waved a hand. "Fine, but I want to see her work today. Let's see if she's worth keeping." As they walked out, Amina could hear faint whispers from behind pillars and half-open doors. Other maids peeked out, shaking their heads at her. One whispered, "She won't last a week." Another muttered, "Poor thing." When they reached her small room at the back of the mansion, Mr. Grant spoke again. "If you want my advice, keep your head down. Do what she says. Don't speak unless spoken to. And never enter her study." Amina placed her small bag on the bed. She had only brought a few clothes, her worn-out shoes, and a photograph of her mother. Her mother was lying in a hospital bed, smiling weakly. The doctor had said she needed surgery soon, and that surgery cost money Amina didn't have. That was why she was here. That was why she would not run away, no matter what. By the afternoon, her first task came, polishing the silver trays in the kitchen. She worked quietly, ignoring the curious glances of the other staff. Her hands moved fast, her mind focused. But she could feel it, the eyes of Madame Elaine. Watching from somewhere, when she finished, she carried the trays to the dining hall. As she entered, Elaine stood by the window, sipping wine. Without warning, Elaine turned, oops, and the wine glass slipped from her hand. Spilling red liquid across the white marble, Amina rushed forward, kneeling to clean it. She expected Elaine to shout, but Elaine only watched, her lips curling in something between a smile and a sneer. "You're calm," she said after a long silence. "Most maids panic when I test them." Amina looked up briefly. "Wine cleans easier when—" "You don't waste time panicking, ma'am." For a moment, something flickered in Elaine's eyes. Irritation, maybe even respect. But it vanished quickly. We'll see how long that calm lasts. As Amina left the hall, she caught sight of two butlers whispering near the staircase. She could only hear one sentence. Ever since Paris, she hates them all. Amina frowned. Who was them all? And what happened in Paris? She didn't know. But she was sure of one thing. This job would not be easy. And yet, as she lay in her bed that night, staring at the photograph of her mother, she whispered to herself, "I can't lose this job. I won't." The next morning, Amina woke before sunrise. She had barely slept, her mind restless from the events of yesterday. The mansion was silent, the kind of silence that felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. She dressed quickly, tying her hair back, and headed to the kitchen. The chef, Mrs. Bowen, was already there, her plump hands moving quickly as she chopped vegetables. She gave Amina a small nod but didn't speak. Amina began her assigned work, cleaning the glass cabinets in the main hall. It was quiet work, and she liked it that way. But she could feel eyes on her again. When she turned, she saw Madame Elaine. Standing at the top of the stairs, her gaze fixed on her like a hawk. Amina kept polishing, pretending not to notice. Elaine descended slowly, each step echoing. "You're up early," she said, her voice smooth but cold. "Yes, ma'am," Amina replied, without looking away from the glass. "Good," Elaine said. "Then you'll have time for something special today." Amina finally turned, curious. Elaine's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "In the silver room, there are 500 spoons. I want them polished until I can see my reflection perfectly in each one. And I want it done before lunch. 500 spoons." Amina knew this was not a normal task. It was a test, maybe even a punishment. Still, she nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Elaine's eyes glittered. "Oh, and I've invited guests for lunch. I'll tell them to check your work." With that, she left, the sound of her heels fading into the hall. The silver room was dim, with long shelves stacked with trays of cutlery. The spoons gleamed faintly in the low light, waiting to be polished. Amina sat down, took a deep breath, and began. Her fingers worked quickly, dipping cloth into polish, rubbing each spoon until it shone. Time passed slowly. Her hands started to ache, but she refused to slow down. By 10 a.m., she had finished half. That's when she heard voices, laughter, footsteps. She looked up to see Madame Elaine returning, followed by 3 elegantly dressed guests. "Oh, here she is," Elaine said sweetly. "Still working. So slow, isn't she?" The guests looked at Amina with mild curiosity. One woman chuckled. "Why not just use a machine?" Amina smiled politely. "Because, ma'am, each spoon is different. They deserve attention, just like people." The guests laughed softly, not mocking, but amused. One of the men even said, "I like this one, Elaine. She has a way with words." Amina saw it, a flicker of annoyance in Elaine's eyes. She had not expected Amina to charm her guests. When the guests left, Elaine stepped closer. "Careful, Maid," she whispered. This house does not reward clever mouths. Amina said nothing. She simply returned to polishing. By noon, every spoon shone like a mirror. Amina carried them into the dining hall just as the guests were taking their seats. The old man at the head of the table picked up one and smiled. "Perfect work," he said loudly. Elaine's jaw tightened, but she forced a smile for her guests. "Yes, perfect," she agreed. After lunch, Amina returned to her room, exhausted but satisfied. She thought she had earned a moment's rest. But when she opened her small drawer to put away her cleaning cloth, she froze. Her purse was open. She never left it open. Inside, her few belongings had been moved. The photograph of her mother was lying face down. Someone had searched her things. That night, she went to the kitchen for water and overheard two butlers talking in the pantry. She stopped just outside, hidden by the doorway. "I'm telling you, she's looking for something," one said. The other replied, "Ever since Paris, she's been different. She doesn't trust anyone, especially the maids." Amina's brows furrowed. Paris again. She wanted to ask, but she knew it was too dangerous to reveal she had been listening. The next morning, the staff gathered in the hallway for daily instructions. Elaine appeared at the top of the stairs, looking like a queen about to pass judgment. "Amina," she called. "Yes, ma'am, you will serve tea in my study today," Elaine said. "Then don't spill a drop." The study. The room Mr. Grant had warned her about Amina carried the tray carefully into the room. It smelled faintly of old perfume and expensive paper. The walls were lined with books, and a large mahogany desk stood in the center as she set down the tea. Her eyes caught something on a side table, a silver frame with a photograph inside. It was turned slightly away, but she could see enough to make out two young women. One was clearly Elaine, younger and smiling. The other wore a maid's uniform. Before she could look closer, Elaine's voice cut through the air. "Is my tea ready?" Amina quickly stepped back. "Yes, ma'am." Elaine sipped her tea slowly, her eyes never leaving Amina's face. "Do you enjoy working here?" "Yes, ma'am," Amina lied smoothly. "Good," Elaine said, setting down the cup. "Then you'll last longer than the others. But remember, every maid here eventually shows her true self. And when she does," Elaine's smile was sharp, "I remove her." Amina left the room with her heartbeat pounding in her ears. She now knew two things. Elaine was watching her closely, and the mystery of Paris and the maid in that photo might be the key to everything. The next few days were strange. Madame Elaine no longer made small comments or sarcastic remarks at Amina. She simply watched. Everywhere Amina went, polishing the silver, arranging flowers, dusting shelves, she felt those icy blue eyes on her. The other staff noticed, too. "She's studying you," Mrs. Bowen whispered in the kitchen one morning. "Why?" Amina asked, keeping her voice low. The older woman shook her head. "Elaine only watches people she's planning to break." Amina didn't flinch. She had promised herself she would survive this job for her mother's sake. But she also knew, if Elaine wanted to break her, the real test was coming. It came sooner than she expected. On a rainy morning, Mr. Grant handed her a folded note. "From Madame Elaine," he said grimly. The note read, "Amina, prepare the grand hall for inspection. Noon sharp." That was all. No details, no list. Just inspection. When Amina entered the grand hall, she stopped in shock. Every single piece of silver in the mansion, trays, plates, goblets, candlesticks, had been piled into the room. The polished marble floor was hidden beneath tables stacked high with metal that needed cleaning. She looked at the clock. It was already 9 a.m. "This is impossible," she murmured. Mr. Grant came in quietly behind her. "She wants it done by noon," he said, "and she's invited the mayor for tea at 1. "This is a trap, Amina." "I know," she replied, rolling up her sleeves. She started working fast, her hands moving in a blur. But with every item she cleaned, it felt like two more appeared from nowhere. Her arms began to ache, her back stiffened, but she refused. To stop by 11:30, she was almost done when a strange sound made her look up. Voices, footsteps, laughter. Elaine entered the hall with 5 guests, all dressed like they belonged on magazine covers. "Oh dear," Elaine said loudly. "She's still not finished." One guest, a man with a silver cane, chuckled. "This seems cruel, Elaine." "Nonsense," Elaine replied sweetly. "If she's as good as everyone says, she'll manage." Amina kept working, ignoring the eyes on her. She could feel sweat sliding down her neck, her fingers sore from gripping the cloth, but she polished faster, making sure each piece shone. Lap. At 11:58, she placed the last candlestick on the table. "There," she said softly. The guests clapped politely. The man with the cane picked up a goblet, tilting it to the light. "Perfect." Elaine's smile tightened, the same way it had when the old man had praised Amina's spoons. After the guests left, Elaine walked toward her, heels clicking. "Sharply impressive," she said, in a voice so low only Amina could hear. "But let's see how you handle accidents." Without warning, she reached behind her and pulled a small glass vase from the table and let it fall. It shattered, water spilling over the silver trays, smudging them with flower petals and dirt. Amina didn't react. She knelt, picking up the broken pieces carefully, then wiped the water off the trays. "You should be more careful," Amina said softly, meeting her eyes for the first time. For a moment, Elaine looked almost surprised, but then her lips curved into a dangerous smile. "You're a bold one." That night, Amina returned to her room, exhausted. She opened her drawer to put away her uniform, and froze again. Her purse had been searched again. This time, the photograph of her mother was missing. Her stomach dropped. She rushed out of her room, searching the empty corridors. Finally, she found it on a table outside Elaine's study. The photo was lying face up, next to a half-empty glass of wine. Amina's heart pounded. Elaine had taken it. But why? The next morning, Elaine summoned her. "You care about your mother," Elaine said, sipping tea. "It's touching." Amina stayed silent, her jaw tight. Elaine leaned back in her chair. "You see, I believe people will do anything for the ones they love. Lie, steal, betray." "I'm not a thief," Amina said calmly. "Not yet," Elaine replied with a smile. "But I will find your weakness." She placed the photograph on the table and slid it toward Amina. "You may keep it for now." That day, Amina understood something important. Elaine wasn't just trying to fire her. She wanted to break her spirit. But Amina also realized something else. The photograph of Elaine, with the maid in her study, might explain everything. And if she could find the truth about Paris, maybe she could turn this dangerous game around. Rain tapped softly against the tall glass windows as Amina moved quietly through the mansion. It had been 3 days since Elaine had taken and returned her mother's photograph. But the message was clear. Nothing in this house was safe, not even her memories. Amina had learned to move like a shadow. She worked silently, kept her head down, but kept her ears open. She began noticing patterns. Elaine was never in her study before noon. The room stayed locked most of the day, but every night, Elaine went inside alone for hours. Amina knew she had to see the photograph in that silver frame again, the one with Elaine and the maid. Something about it pulled at her, like it held the answer to why Elaine hated every maid that crossed her path. Her chance came on a bright afternoon. Elaine had left for a charity event in the city. Mr. Grant was in the East Wing checking deliveries, and the other staff were busy preparing dinner. Amina walked quickly toward the study, her heart pounding. The door was unlocked. Strange. She slipped inside and closed it quietly behind her. The room smelled faintly of lavender and old paper. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, glinting off gold-rimmed books and crystal ornaments. And there it was, the silver frame. She stepped closer. Now she could see the whole picture. Elaine stood on the left, younger but unmistakable, smiling in a way Amina had never seen before. Her arm was around another woman, a black maid, maybe a few years older than Amina, wearing a crisp uniform and a bright smile. They looked close, not just employer and servant, but like sisters in spirit, except the maid's face was scratched out with deep, angry lines. Amina's stomach tightened. Why would Elaine keep a photograph of someone she'd tried to erase? She opened the desk drawer. Inside were old letters folded neatly. She pulled one out and scanned it. The handwriting was elegant, but the words were hurried. Elaine, I'll meet you in Paris. I promise, everything will be fine. Don't trust them. It was signed with the name Clara. The sound of footsteps in the hall made her freeze. She stuffed the letter back into the drawer and turned toward the window, pretending to dust. The door opened and Mr. Grant stepped in. What are you doing here? His voice was low, urgent. I was just cleaning, Amina said, keeping her tone steady. He shut the door and walked closer. If she catches you in here, it won't just be your job, you lose. Amina hesitated, then asked, who was Clara? Mr. Grant's face stiffened. He glanced toward the door, then lowered his voice. Clara was her half-sister, same father. Different mothers, but Clara was born to a maid. Elaine's father never treated her as equal. Still, the two of them were close. What happened? Amina pressed. His jaw tightened. Paris happened. That's all you need to know. He opened the door and gestured for her to leave. Don't dig into this, Amina. It won't end well. That night, Amina lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The image of the scratched-out face haunted her. If Clara was Elaine's half-sister, then maybe this cruelty toward maids wasn't random. Maybe it was personal. But she didn't just want to know the truth. She needed it. If she could understand Elaine's pain, maybe she could survive this place, or even change it. The next morning, Elaine returned from her trip in a strange mood. She didn't shout, didn't give impossible orders. Instead, she watched Amina, with a sharper focus, as if she knew something had shifted. At lunch, Elaine invited her into the dining room while she ate. Tell me, Elaine said, cutting into her food, do you think I'm cruel? The question was so sudden, Amina almost dropped the tray. I don't think I know you well enough to say, ma'am. Elaine's lips twitched in amusement. A safe answer. Clever girl. She leaned forward. But let me tell you something. Kindness is a weakness, and weakness gets you killed. She returned to eating, the conversation over as quickly. As it had started, later that evening, Amina passed the hallway outside the study and paused. The door was ajar, light spilling into the corridor. Inside, Elaine sat at her desk, holding the photograph of her and Clara. Amina watched quietly from the shadows. Elaine's fingers traced the scratched-out face. Her expression wasn't angry this time. It was sad. Why did you have to leave me? Elaine whispered. Amina's chest tightened. In that moment, she didn't see the cruel mistress of the mansion. She saw a woman carrying a wound that had never healed. Before Amina could move away, the floorboard beneath her creaked. Elaine's head snapped up, enjoying the view. Maid. Her voice was sharp again, her guard back up. No, ma'am. I was just passing by, Amina said quickly. Elaine's eyes narrowed. Be careful where you walk. Some doors are better left closed. That night, Amina lay awake, turning over the pieces in her mind. Clara, Paris, the letters, the photograph. She didn't know the whole story yet. But she knew one thing. Elaine's cruelty came from somewhere deep, and if Amina could uncover the truth about Paris, she might be able to do something no maid before her had done. Not just survive Elaine, but change her for weeks. Amina had endured every test Madame Elaine threw at her. The endless cleaning, the impossible orders, the subtle humiliations. She had learned to keep her head down, speak only when needed, and never let her temper show. But Madame Elaine was growing impatient. No matter what she did, Amina didn't crack. And that, to Elaine, was infuriating. One Thursday morning, the summons came. "Amina," Mr. Grant said as he appeared at her door. "Madam wants you to serve at the formal dinner tonight." Amina looked up from folding laundry. "Isn't that the butler's job?" "It is," Mr. Grant admitted. "Which means this is not about service. It's about something else." She understood. This wasn't a request, it was a trap. That evening, the mansion glittered under 1,000 tiny lights. The long dining table gleamed with crystal glasses, polished silver, and floral arrangements so large they nearly blocked the view across. The table, the guests were already arriving. Businessmen, politicians, socialites, all dressed in expensive suits and gowns. Amina stood quietly at the side, holding a tray of drinks as Madame Elaine swept into the room. She looked flawless, her silk gown flowing behind her like water. Her eyes flicked to Amina, and a slow, calculating smile spread across her lips. Dinner began smoothly. Amina served quietly, moving between guests without drawing attention. But she could feel it, Elaine watching her every step. When the soup course came, Amina carried the steaming bowls carefully, setting them down one by one. She was just placing the last bowl in front of a guest when it happened. A sharp gasp, the crash of porcelain, and suddenly hot soup spilled down Elaine's silk gown. The room froze. Elaine shot to her feet, her voice rising. "You clumsy fool." Amina blinked, stunned. "Ma'am, do you have any idea how much this dress costs?" Elaine's voice dripped with fury. "Get out, now." The guests shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between the two women before Amina could step away. A deep voice spoke from the far end of the table. "I saw what happened," said an older man with silver hair and sharp eyes. "She didn't spill it. You did." Elaine froze. The man set down his spoon. "You stood too close. Elaine, saw you tip the bowl toward yourself. This is not the maid's fault." The room went utterly silent. For the first time since Amina had met her, Elaine looked unsure. She forced a laugh, waving her hand. "Oh, perhaps I overreacted. Accidents happen." But her eyes, her cold, furious eyes, locked on Amina like a blade. The rest of the dinner passed in tense silence. Amina kept working, though her heart raced. She knew what that look meant. This wasn't over. When the guests left, Elaine said nothing. She didn't need to. Later that night, Amina was in her room folding away her uniform when the door creaked open. Mrs. Bowen, the chef, stepped inside and shut it quietly. "Child," she whispered, "you're in dangerous waters." Now? No one embarrasses Madame Elaine in front of her friends and walks away untouched. Amina frowned. "But I didn't." "I know you didn't," Mrs. Bowen said, but she never admitted it. "She wants to make you pay for tonight. And when she decides to punish someone, it's never small." The warning came true the next morning. Elaine summoned Amina to the study. The air in the room was heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding in anger. Elaine didn't sit behind her desk this time. She stood by the window, her back to Amina. "You embarrassed me last night," she said, without turning. "I didn't do anything, ma'am," Amina replied carefully. "That's not the point," Elaine said, finally facing her. "The point is you stood there while one of my most important guests called me a liar?" I can't control what others say, Amina said softly. Elaine's smile was slow and dangerous. No, but I can control what happens to you. Amina felt the challenge in the air. This was no longer about spilled soup. This was about breaking her completely. I've decided, Elaine said, that I will give you a choice soon, and when I do, you will show me your true nature, just like Clara did. The name made Amina's pulse quicken. Clara. But Elaine only smirked. You'll see. That night, as Amina lay in bed, the pieces began to form in her mind. Clara, Paris, the scratched-out photo. And now, Elaine's warning. The breaking point wasn't the soup. It wasn't even the public scene. It was coming. And it would be something much bigger. Something that would force her to choose between her values and the person she loved most in the world. The mansion was unusually quiet that morning. No shouting from Madame Elaine. No sharp orders echoing down the hall. It was the kind of silence that didn't feel peaceful. It felt like the air before a storm Amina had been avoiding. Elaine since the breaking point dinner 2 days earlier. That night, the truth about the spilled soup had come out in front of guests, making Elaine look like a liar. The humiliation had been public. Amina knew the woman would not let it go. Just after breakfast, Mr. Grant appeared at Amina's door. His face was pale. Madam wants to see you. Now, Amina followed him to Elaine's private sitting room. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, but the warmth stopped there. Elaine sat in a backed chair, a crystal glass in one hand, the other resting on her lap. On the table beside her was the photograph, the one of her and Clara. Sit, Elaine said. Amina sat opposite her, keeping her face calm. You've been difficult, Elaine began, her voice smooth. Most maids cry by now. They beg. They quit. But you, she tilted her head, studying Amina like a puzzle. You're still here. I need the job, ma'am, Amina said quietly. Or maybe, Elaine said slowly, you think you can change me. Amina's heart skipped a beat. Did Elaine know she had been looking into her past? Elaine's eyes hardened. Let me tell you something. People do not change. I learned that in Paris. She stood and walked to the window. Her voice was quieter, now, but sharp. Clara thought love and loyalty would save her. She was wrong. She sided with people who wanted to destroy me. She lied, she stole, and in the end, she left me to face it all alone. Amina swallowed. I'm sorry that happened to you, ma'am, but I'm not Clara. Elaine turned, her gaze piercing. You're right. You're not. Which is why you still have a choice. A choice. Yes, Elaine said, sitting back down. She slid the photograph across the table toward Amina. Tell me, if your mother's life depended on betraying someone here, would you do it? Amina froze. What do you mean? Elaine's smile was thin. There are staff members here who think I don't know they're stealing from me. Give me their names, and I'll give you double your salary. Enough to pay for your mother's treatment and more. It was a trap. Amina knew it instantly. She also knew that naming someone, even falsely, would ruin them forever. I don't betray people, Amina said finally. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Elaine laughed a soft, dangerous sound. So you are like Clara, always thinking loyalty is a virtue. That night, Amina couldn't sleep. She sat on her bed, holding her mother's photograph. The temptation had been real. The thought of ending her mother's suffering was enough to make her heart ache. But she knew that trading her integrity for money would make her no better than the lies Elaine believed. She was still thinking when a soft knock came at her door. It was Mrs. Bowen, the chef. You need to know something, Mrs. Bowen whispered. Clara didn't betray Madame. She tried to protect her, but the people in Paris, dangerous people, made it look like Clara was guilty. Elaine believed the lies, and by the time she learned the truth, Clara was gone. Amina's chest tightened. Gone where? No one knows, Mrs. Bowen said. Some say she died. Some say she disappeared to keep Elaine safe. But Elaine, she never forgave her. The next morning, Amina made a decision. She walked into Elaine's sitting room without knocking. The older woman looked up sharply, ready to scold, but Amina spoke first. I know about Clara, Amina said, her voice steady. I know she was your sister. I know she didn't betray you. Elaine's eyes widened for a fraction of a second, then narrowed. And where did you hear that? It doesn't matter, Amina said. What matters is that you've spent years punishing the wrong people. Your sister loved you. She would never want you to become this. The room was so quiet that the ticking clock on the wall seemed loud. Elaine rose slowly from her chair. Do you know what happens to people who speak to me like that? She asked. I'm still here, Amina replied softly. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Elaine sat back down, her expression unreadable. You have courage, she said finally, and that is inconvenient. But Amina thought. She saw it, the smallest flicker of doubt in Elaine's eyes. That night, for the first time since she arrived, Amina slept peacefully. She didn't know if she had changed anything yet, but she knew she had planted a seed, and sometimes seeds grew in the most unexpected soil. The days after Amina's confrontation with Madame Elaine were different. The tension in the mansion didn't vanish, but it shifted. Elaine still gave orders, but they weren't laced with the same venom. She still inspected the maid's work, but the insults were fewer. Her voice less sharp. It was as if the air had lost some of its frost. Amina didn't relax. She knew trust was fragile here. But she could feel the change in subtle ways. One afternoon, as she was arranging flowers in the grand hall, she noticed the other maids laughing quietly among themselves. That had never happened before. For the first time since she arrived, the mansion didn't feel like a prison. The real change came a week later. Elaine called all the staff into the dining room. Her posture was still regal, her chin high, but her eyes softer. There will be new rules, she announced. Everyone will have 2 afternoons off a week. Pay will be increased by 10%. And she paused here, her gaze flicking. Toward Amina, I expect the same high standards, but without unnecessary cruelty. The staff exchanged stunned glances. No one dared clap, but the relief was visible on their faces. Amina stayed quiet, but inside, her heart felt light. Later that day, Elaine sent for her. When Amina entered the sitting room, she saw the silver-framed photograph on the table again, but this time, the scratches over Clara's face were gone. The photo had been restored. You fixed it, Amina said softly. Elaine's fingers rested lightly on the frame. I thought it was time. They sat in silence for a moment. I've been thinking about what you said, Elaine began. About Clara. About me. She looked out the window. Maybe I've been wrong. Amina didn't speak. Elaine's voice grew quieter. I don't know if I can change completely, but perhaps I can start. A few days later, Amina received an envelope under her door. Inside was a letter and a check. The letter was brief. For your mother's treatment. Consider it. Overdue payment for loyalty I did not deserve. It was signed simply E. Amina stared at the check, her eyes stinging with tears. It was more than enough for the surgery. The morning after her mother's operation, Amina returned to the mansion. The sun was bright, the gardens fragrant with blooming roses. She was on her way to the kitchen when she heard laughter from the grand hall. Peeking in, she saw Elaine speaking with 2 maids, not shouting, speaking. One of the maids even handed her a cup of tea, and Elaine accepted it with a nod. It was a small thing, but it was everything. That evening, Elaine called her to the study. "You've lasted longer than anyone," Elaine said. "And not because you bowed your head the lowest, but because you refused to break." Amina met her gaze. "I only did what I had to do, and now," Elaine said, standing, "you'll do it as head housekeeper, if you want the position." Amina blinked. "Me?" "Yes, you've proven you can manage more than just silver spoons." Kina accepted, her voice steady but her heart racing. From that day, the mansion transformed. Work was still hard, but it was fair. The staff began to smile more, share meals together, even sing in the kitchen. And sometimes, when the halls were quiet, Amina would see Elaine in her study, sitting by the window, the restored photograph of her and Clara in her hands. One evening, Amina passed the open door and heard Elaine whisper, "I hope you'd be proud of me, Clara." Months later, Amina's mother came to visit the mansion. She walked slowly, still recovering, but her smile was wide as she looked around the grand hall. "This is where you work?" her mother asked, her voice full of wonder. "Yes," Amina said. "And things are better now." As they passed the study, Elaine stepped out. For a moment, the two women simply looked at each other. Then Elaine extended her hand to Amina's mother. "Thank you," she said softly, "for raising someone who could stand against me." Amina's mother smiled. "She's been standing up to me since she could walk." For the first time, Elaine laughed, a real laugh, warm and unguarded. The house of tears was no more, and it had happened because one maid had done the unthinkable, not by betraying, not by breaking, but by holding on to her truth until it broke through someone else's walls.